Namaskar and welcome to Daily Global Insights, episode 246 with Sri and Sri. Today is Wednesday, and here are the main points. Delhi police bust multi-state Pakistan organized terror module linked to the DI group, and 6 arrested. China tells Japan China tells Japan PM candidates not to meddle into the internal affairs of China. Now to Biden. Did he ask Afghan president to lie? Disagreements continue to brew amongst the Taliban members over the government formation. In global news, what is Turkey's role in Africa? What is its game plan? With 3-point strategies of embassies, direct flights, and commercial counselors, is Erdogan trying to well in 2002 and 38 visits to 28 countries makes him the most visited leader. Sridhar, we are going to try and connect you. If it drops, I will continue. Please go ahead, sir. Welcome to PGurus channel.
Good morning, and good morning to all, and thank you so much. My apologies for very poor connection today. But to Mr. Erdogan, I think that the fact seems to be that wherever there is China and geopolitical issues, you seem to have Mr. Erdogan's nose there. The fact that China has been making its forays, if you recall, a couple of days ago, there was a very big India-Africa summit, as well as strategic interest in making this an annual exercise. Then along the way comes Mr. Erdogan, and Erdogan says that he has been having continuous dialogue with a number of countries, and he has used a 3-pronged strategy, which is effectively he has connected Istanbul directly to many countries in Africa. He has appointed counselors for trade partnership between Turkey and the African countries. He's also established embassies, and from a mere footprint of 12, he has got now 43 embassies, and he has made 38 visits, which makes him one of the most actively engaged members, in fact, the most actively engaged member amongst any in the global community.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, is meeting this week to discuss security situation after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. The meeting in Tajikistan will be attended by China, India, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Pakistan. Sridhar, this one is perhaps again one of those things that maybe India shouldn't even be attending, but India does do that. What are your thoughts, sir? SCO, how effective has it been? Has it been useful to anyone?
SCO has not been useful to anybody. It is a mechanism that China is using to get Pakistan a footprint. As you know, Pakistan doesn't have a footprint in any of the global forums. It has got Pakistan in it. If you see a country which is also missing here is Afghanistan. During the U.S. presence, they excluded Afghanistan. They called it as the Shanghai Cooperation. If you put up a map, you will find the only country that is missing in that block is the Afghanistan. You got Tajiks, you have Uzbeks, you have Indians, and you have the Pakistanis, and you have the Chinese, and then you can have the adjacent Russians. So you asked me the question whether it is moot. Let's take a look. We have had BRICS meeting in which you had China and Russia. Then you have had leaders visit India. Then you're going to have a Quad meeting, which is coming up, on September 24th. So it's obviously to get collective intelligence as well as keep on having dialogue with nothing in mind other than people trying to scratch each other's back and figuring out what exactly they want to accomplish. It's obviously the China and Pakistan nexus in this whole Central Asian republics is very pivotal in the present circumstances as to what is going on in Afghanistan. So that seems to be the reason why Indians and Russians are very keen to be in it rather than be outside of it.
China and ASEAN are pushing for a January 1 start to kickstart RCEP after the deal was signed last November. The largest trade bloc includes China, ASEAN, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Can we have the first map, please? They have left open India to join the group, and China tells Japan's PM candidates not to meddle into the internal affairs of China. So back to RCEP, Sridharji, we have the map up.
Yeah, RCEP, we have done an extensive coverage on RCEP and that whole Asian region, if you recall, through a fireside discussion around the economic implications as well as the strategic importance of that specific region. The RCEP was done, and we covered this as well. This was signed in November last year. China came back into the forum. UK is probably the first other country which is in the waiting list to make into RCEP. China is leveraging this opportunity because China seems to be extremely keen to re-engage ASEAN, extremely keen to have RCEP, and it is using these forums as a mechanism to continue its onward journey on trade pacts and effectively nullifying any other global moves that are being made against China. So hence they have this rush to kickstart this meeting on January 1st. Only ASEAN has shown some interest. Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand have absolutely shown no inclination to attend this meeting on January 1st. In fact, they have not even responded.
And China provokes the United States with a fleet of 4 ships from the Chinese PLA Navy plan. It was photographed making its way towards the US exclusive economic zone near the Alaska's Aleutian Islands. Sridharji, this is again provocation, and one doesn't understand what China has in mind. But if you look at all these, one meeting after the other, it's like they are up to something else, and they want to keep the stations busy looking at all these councils and meetings. It looks like. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I think that's exactly it. I think So there has been a number of meetings, and that has involved Australia, Japan, Korea, including Russia, Saudi, France, and United States. And many of these meetings are bilateral or some form of multilateral sessions. So China is perturbed whether it is getting any correct information as to what exactly these dialogue and discussions and whether they're specifically targeted at actions on China. What has also annoyed China is that now in the LDP candidates in Japan have made it a point to include 2 important things. One, China is the front and center of their problem, and number 1. Number 2, they want to increase the defense budget by X amount so that they have capabilities to combat. So what is China doing? China is provoking United States. They believe that United States is the reason for all this stuff that is going on around it. So it sends a fleet of 4 ships into the Alaskan region.
Viewers, may I request everybody to start liking the channel, because we are beginning to see a lot of interest across the world, and it would help if this becomes more viral. So certainly there is a lot of significant news to cover just around the corner. Thank you very much. EU has also penned the Indo-Pacific strategy with deeper ties and China as the centerpiece of focus. Chinese ambassador has been barred from the United Kingdom Parliament over the sanctions row. What is this thing with the China's ambassador and the United Kingdom, sir?
Well, if you recall, the post-Hong Kong as well as the Xinjiang human rights issue, a whole bunch of countries imposed sanctions and restrictions on certain people as a gesture to let China know they are not satisfied. So UK was one of the first countries which took the lead and sanctioned close to 16 officials. This also we have covered in DGI. We also covered in DGI that the big database where many of the UK parliamentarians were listed. So the UK reciprocated with targeting some of the people. So what happens? The Chinese Prime Minister, Chinese ambassador, sorry, not, let me correct, Chinese ambassador was invited. Politely, the UK parliamentarian speaker said, "You are one of the banned officials. We are not going to be allowed to come into our parliament."
Wow. And France criticizes Russian mercenaries being brought into Mali. Can we have the Sahel map, please? Sridharji, the Sahel map is up. Viewers, we have been talking about the Sahel region of Africa, which is also one other hot spot that has been emerging for the last few months. Sridharji, I have the map up.
Okay, great. So I think that the key message here is you can see the Sahel region and Mali is just adjacent. So therefore, there is a fear as to why the mercenaries have been called in, and much of the troubles that around that entire region is these independent mercenaries and the other kind of groups, mostly Islamic, different variations of the Islamic groups fighting the government and creating instability. So therefore, the other reason why France has a problem in terms of the Russian mercenaries, Central African Republic, which is again adjacent to the Sahel region, right in the center, you will find that there is that whole region is being monitored and managed with the help of the Russian mercenaries. So they do not want to have one more foreign power other than China adding issues to the potpourri. Now you go back and look at the first item that we covered, Turkey. Turkey having a footprint right across Africa with 43 embassies. So you have the European nations, you have India, you have China, and you have the most potent terrorist groups operating in that specific region, making it very, very complicated and complex, especially in the present situation in Afghanistan.
And let's take a look at what is happening in Syria region. In a meeting with Assad, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, slams the foreign forces in Syria. IAEA condemns Iran's treatment of nuclear inspectors and calls it unacceptable. Iranian guards sexually assaulted UN inspectors as per the reports. The United States holds back Egypt aid over human rights violations. Wow. As always, things happening in the Middle East area.
So we go from the Asian region. We just touched briefly on Europe. So we then move into the African, and then we come back into the great Middle Eastern or West Asian region. When you look at the West Asian region, as you know, that again you have Turkey, you have Iran, Iraq, especially Iran, and then you also have Israel with Lebanon and issues emanating from the Syrian side of the country. So, Mr. Vladimir Putin is the only person who has kept Mr. Bashir al-Assad in power. So he blames again because Mr. Biden's foreign policy has an exception, because the exception here is Syria and northern Syria and Iraq, most notably, where there's still US forces and there's boots on ground. He has not removed those forces from that specific region. So he blames the instability in Lebanon and Syria to the US policy of occupation and creating trouble.
And disagreements continue to brew among Taliban members over government formation. And remember, yesterday, if you had listened to General G.D. Bakshi's hangout, you would have known that some of the so-called ministers have actually gone missing now. People don't know where they are. And it appears that the Haqqani network has gained ascendancy with Pakistan's help. I'm going to name the country. A humanitarian crisis and foreign intervention in Afghanistan is the greatest threat as we go forward. In fact, General Bakshi was so bold as to predict that Afghanistan could see the same kind of thing that happened in Bangladesh 50 years ago, when the Pakistani forces ran roughshod. They killed a lot of Hindus, they raped, pillaged, plundered. The whole country was never the same after that. Of course, they also lost that country. We have to wait and see what's going to happen here. Sridharji, there is so much happening. Also, viewers, we have a hangout with Professor M.D. Nalapat, at 9 p.m. IST in about 3 hours from now, where we are going to discuss all these things in a little bit more detail. Your take, sir, on what is happening in the government formation in Afghanistan. A lot of stuff has been discussed yesterday, as well as it's going to be discussed today in more detail. Your take, sir.
So my take is very simple, that um, based on all the evidence that we are seeing, the Haqqani network seems to have claimed ascendancy. If people, to rejog everybody's memory, the entire security of Kabul and adjacent Kabul area was the responsibility of the Haqqani network. Who gave that, we don't know, but they were the people who were controlling the most pivotal region, not the outer Mazari Sharif, Kandahar, Kunduz, and other regions, but Kabul. So clearly, there were disagreements. There was also a fight between Mr. Haqqani and Mr. Baradar. And still, we only have the voice video. There's no video, there's only a voice view of Mr. Baradar saying he's fine. We covered that yesterday. And it looks like, there is a coalition or collusion between a country and the Haqqanis to effectively take charge of Afghanistan and to establish a foreign power to be at the seat in conjunction with them, running the administration. And because based on all the excesses and the stuff that is going on in terms of the beheadings and people being, other kinds of atrocities, one can only conclude that this is the reason why there are issues around the formation of the government. I just want to go back one more point and then one more thing from the previous. The IAEA inspectors were sexually assaulted. This is the first time something like this has happened. Who were there to inspect the Iranian nuclear installations. It's a very major issue. How they're going to deal with it, we don't know. But this is another developing story in that part of the world. Sorry, I just wanted to cover that point, and then we covered the Afghanistan, and you're going to do a detailed one with Mr. Nalapat. So we have different views emerging. We have a U.S. view, which we are covering from some side. Then you have Major General Bakshi covering it from the Indian vantage point with detail. I think we're going to have another coverage today from Mr. Nalapat, Dr. Nalapat.
Yes, indeed. And let's now start taking a look at the news in and around the United States. First, let us take a look at the Taliban movement as to how they managed to capture the whole of Afghanistan. Sridharji, the first map is up there.
Yes, I think that if you carefully navigate the specific maps, you will see that we are starting with, I think, the 2017 map. I can't see, for some reasons, I'm not getting the maps. So, I need to be guided and navigated by
Sri. Can you go to the next one, please?
Okay. So you will begin to see as you move from in the August, as you move, you will see that there is slow but progressive occupation of the various parts of Afghanistan until you come to a very important date called August 16th. When you get to August 16th, then you find that the entire map is red. Yes. The significance of this is this movement and the occupation of Taliban. United States intelligence agencies had access to this. So it begs the question that when Mr. Biden and Mr. Ashraf Ghani met, what exactly was the discussion when the entire place was taken over by Taliban? And this is the scope of the discussion, that is the inquiry that is going on. We have only seen the first person come in, and the first person is the Secretary of State, Mr. Antony Blinken. So this was played out to him by Mr. Marco Rubio, and so you can see how the progressive takeovers. So who is the person who advised you that there is no Taliban's control and can be a transition government? All this shows to you is that there was no government. It's effectively, ramshackle takeover by the Taliban and the Taliban rebels. So that is this same map was played out in the inquiry, and that has now led into a series of questions that is being raised and to which Mr. Blinken has no answers.
Well, we have been warning you, viewers, that there is more than one power center in the Biden administration. And with every passing day, this is becoming more and more obvious. Of course, in another corner of the country in California, people don't seem to be understanding what is happening in Washington, D.C., as Gavin Newsom has survived the recall. In fact, he was getting 70% before the recall. After the recall, he got 66%. So the swing away from the Democrats is a mere 4%. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of education to be done. For some reason, people are just not reading what is happening around them. Very, very sad state of affairs. Now, Anthony Blinken is facing a second day of grilling over Afghanistan exit in Capitol Hill. Senate, like Sridharji said, Senator Marco Rubio grilled him, and then Senator Cruz said that he was delusional and incompetent, and he listed three things that went wrong. Sridharji, before I jump to the next senator, can you list the three things that Senator Cruz found wrong?
Well, I think that first and foremost, he said, well, who in the hell gave a direction to give away the Bagram Air Base? Bagram Air Base was fully secured. It had a perimeter which is also secured and insulated from any possibilities of intrusion from any terrorist forces, including Taliban. So it's a fully insulated perimeter, and we had taken possession of Bagram. Why they gave away Bagram and shifted to Kabul, which was under the management of the Haqqani network and Taliban. So it's the first question, who made this decision? It looks very naive. He went on to say, it's almost like, people in university making a discussion and then saying, oh, Taliban, you're good guys, let's just have a coffee. I mean, quote unquote, this way his comments. That's the first. Second, this is very important. He questions, because I listened to the entire briefing. The second important point is, was the manifest given? Was the manifest given to Taliban? That's almost like, here are the people who are coming. Initially, he refused. Then subsequently, he said, yes, we did give the manifest of people whom we are bringing in, so that the people at the checkpoint can have a list of people whom they can allow. So this means effectively that they had access to a list of people, irrespective of whether they were coming in or not, and potentially compromising their security. The third, even worse, that many adults with young kids who they believe could have been sexually assaulted were on the flights of evacuation. He asked the question, do you guys validate whether these guys were sexual predators? And we were bringing sexual predators. We're evacuating in our plane sexual predators. Silence. So major issues as to whom we have brought into the country. And whether they have been fully tested and validated, we don't know. These men, adult men with these young kids, were on the flight saying that they are husband and wife.
And another senator has asked a very direct, pointed question, a question that we have been asking for some time now. Do we have two presidents? Sridharji, can you recount this senator's call and what took place?
Well, he was beginning to ask the question every time we ask Biden. Biden is either non-coherent, or he gets cut off, or he says he's not playing to the script. Then you find a set of decisions that were being made, and who was making these decisions. For example, he said some of the points that the other senators had said, who are making these decisions to vacate? Who made the decisions not to kind of properly sequence the set of actions? Who gave the order to leave all this equipment behind? So is this Mr. Biden, or is this someone else? What was the conversation that he had with Mr. Ashraf Ghani? Did he tell Mr. Ashraf Ghani to lie and basically say everything is okay? So even in some of those press briefings that Mr. Rich has found that the things being cut off, the question and answers being cut off, and then the restarting of the Q&A sessions. So this is what has made this line of questioning from another senator to say, do we have two presidents or we have only one president? And if we don't have two presidents, who is giving the direction to Mr. Biden to constantly change course?
And should Blinken resign and be impeached? That's the question that is now hanging around in the Capitol Hill and Washington, D.C. Sridharji, I don't know if Blinken is to be blamed. Of course, he is the title there, Secretary of State. But there are many players. If you have multiple centers of power, who knows? Somebody is having power without responsibility, Sridharji.
Well, I think right now, the way this is being played out, when we get to Mr. Lloyd Austin, Defense Secretary will speak about that. Right now, he is front and center of the issues. He seems to be the person who is, being engaged in these discussions post Trump's era. And naturally, he is the person who needs to be called into question. This is a state matter as it relates to evacuation, embassy, coordination with foreign powers, etc. So naturally, he is the first cab of the rank, and he's facing the heat.
And there is another controversy brewing, a much bigger one. For example, it's a general of the United States, Mark Milley. Did he violate the Constitution? So there is a long saga. It's a book that is about to come, or it has already come out. Sridharji, take it away. This is a new story, and this is chilling.
Mark Milley is the chief of staff for all of the armed forces. So General Mark Milley is emerging to be a controversial figure. This is a book that has been written by the very famous Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. The book is called Peril. Now, there are several controversies. This book was completed probably sometime 3-4 months prior to the elections. Why did they delay release of this book? Whether the release of this book would have created some other types of controversies is one line of story. The second one, he has interviewed more than 200 people. Bob Woodward and Robert Costa have interviewed more than 200 people, and they've collected copious evidence. Now, obviously, it's all unknown sources or sources whose name have been hidden. So this is the other piece of thing that is being debated in the media. What's the issue? The issue is that General Mark Milley seems to have very close association with General Lee of PLA. He has made 2 calls, one call on October 20th and one call on January 8th. The call on the October 20th, that's correct. Sorry, October 30th, 4 days before the elections. October 30th, 4 days before the elections, the call says, "Don't worry, Mr. Lee, you and I have known each other for 5 years. We will not make any attack. If there is any attack contemplated, you will have prior information, and not to get rattled, and we'll keep you informed." If such a call, as is being written in the book, is made, he is effectively taken charge as the commander-in-chief overriding the president. It potentially creates room for him to be charged with treason and court-martial. The second call is on January 8th, 2 days after the January 6th riots, to General Lee. And he makes the statement again, democracy is intact. Don't worry about these tribulations and these disturbances in Washington, D.C. Everything is on track, and there will be a government, and we are moving forward. Now, why is he making this call to him on January 8th, 2 days? And who is General Lee? He's a foreign power. He's an enemy. So it's the second call. We don't have, the book is not released. It's called Peril, but people have access to the book, the snippets, and these are some of the highlights from the book, and not to be missed. And finally, He tells Nancy Pelosi, I question the mental state and the capability or calibration of President Trump. Don't worry. And this is to Nancy Pelosi. Again, in Daily Global Insights, we had talked about Nancy Pelosi, that whole period, elections, post elections, and, concern about Trump having, keys to the nuclear codes. And also Nancy Pelosi with a bunch of people going and meeting Defense Department and saying, during this transition period, keep us in the loop and don't listen to Mr. Trump. If he initiates something, talk to us. So when you add all these things together, Mr. Mark Milley is in deep trouble. We haven't finished the investigation, and this may start pretty soon thereafter.
And Trump and top Republicans have already called for Mark Milley's ouster over the Afghan exit. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman says that General Milley must resign if secret calls with China occurred. Recall that we had spoken about this in DGI, Nancy Pelosi and company asking the defense team to control and veto any Trump decisions. This was the time after the elections had taken place and before the new president was sworn in. There was a lot of uncertainty, especially around January 6th, and we had covered all this. Now, the Democrats threaten the defense secretary with a subpoena if he doesn't turn up for House hearing. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ignored the calls to appear in front of the committee's House hearings, and we have to wait and see what plays out. Looks like he doesn't want to get his neck in again. So we have predicted 2-3 weeks ago, I think, that both Blinken and Austin are in trouble, but we think that there is a minor matter of missing $66 odd billion, which nobody can explain where it went. So this is not going to stop there. It's going to go much further up. Let's wait and see. But if it should happen, remember it came in PGurus first. Al-Qaeda is rebuilding with a target attack in US in 1 or 2 years, say CIA and DIA. And the GOP call on State Department to designate Taliban as a terrorist group. It was already a terrorist group, I thought, Sridharji. Why do they want to redesignate them as a terrorist group?
We call them as the new government. If you recall, we discussed this yesterday. It's a new government. And we need to work with the new government. That is what Mr. Biden and Mr. Blinken. We are talking to the new government. And by the way, alas, these are the consequences of the civil war. When you have two sets of people fighting, one emerges as a victor. In this instance, it's called Taliban. So therefore, the House Republicans and even some Democrats, and I believe the Democrats will eventually swing because nobody is going to get elected when the security and the safety and the integrity and the sovereignty of the nation is under threat. If this investigations and line of inquiry continues, so therefore they're saying it's don't keep kind of differing and keep calling Taliban as your next door neighbors. It's time you call them as terrorists and you name. Of course, nobody needs to have second opinion on Al Qaeda. So please designate them as terrorists and don't deal with them, and which is the reason why we have cut off aid and we have frozen their assets. But nothing of that ilk has happened. There's still these fellows are, meddling around with Taliban.
And China is building large-scale nuclear forces along the lines of Russia, warns intelligence agencies. The next scandal is the budget saga. We all must come together now. Senate Democrats struggle for unity to finish the $3.5 trillion bill. Senate awaits ruling on Democrats' plan to push immigration bill in reconciliation, circumventing the GOP. Sridharji, Manchin and Sinema, these are the two senators of Democrats who are pushing for more, reducing the stimulus. They are the ones who are not comfortable. They are in border, constituencies. I think looks like the future of US and perhaps the world rests on these two shoulders.
Well, I think it really, as it relates to the matter with regard to the stimulus, it very clearly rests on these two shoulders, and I think there may be a few other people joining the fray once they begin to get see how the wind blows in some of these inquiries. But what is attached to this, why we call it as a scandal, is what is attached to this 3.5 trillion, which is very unusual, is all these other things, which includes the entire illegal immigrants amnesty. If it is 25,000, it's going to cost 6.5 billion. Imagine there's between 8 million illegals already in United States, and then close to somewhere between 2 to 3 million have come in, and most notably 2 million in the last 6 or 7 months. So you're talking about 11 million being granted the amnesty. Then the third, the election, the whole concept of retooling the voting and election law to be included as part of this resolution process for getting this budget through. So there is a whole raft of issues around tying everything to this bill other than just simply allocating money. And this still doesn't have debt limit. Let's put that again, remind, doesn't have the debt limit. Hence, we have chaos and confusion that continues to unravel around this budget.
And let's take a quick look at India news. Many countries of significance have been visiting India, and suddenly India finds itself in the focus in terms of what to do with Afghanistan next. And we have to wait and see how this plays out. Sridharji, your thoughts on the pivotal role that all countries see in India. Where do you see this play out?
Well, I think that it's very clear. There are three specific lines of thinking that is going on. I'm giving you from a U.S. standpoint. I'm sure you're going to hear from the Indian experts on this. India has emerged as the epicenter of knowing the Haqqani network, knowing some members of the Taliban, and some on-ground intelligence around what is happening in Afghanistan. Also, India has had access to certain people who probably may be in India, and so therefore there is the intelligence that people are looking at. The second, India has first-hand experience of dealing with adversity as it relates to dealing with Taliban, especially around that hijack of the helicopter and a whole raft of issues that came out of it. So people are just trying to get an understanding around that. The third which is even more, now having lost the Bagram Air Base, with China and potentially Turkey in the region, what is the security strategy that countries must adopt? Because this is just not going to affect India, it is going to explode into other regions. India does have good relationship with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and there has been some ongoing dialogue that has occurred. And India has also had dialogue with Iran. The fact that the Saudi foreign minister is coming in a rush before the Indian delegation leaves for US implies the alarming importance the developments in the region has taken shape. So which is why India has emerged as the epicenter with so many countries coming in and remaining as the only sane power. Who else are the other two countries? China and Russia. Nobody wants to deal with China on this, and nobody wants to deal with Russia on this. So you're left with India as the power block.
And Delhi police busts a multi-state Pakistan organized terror module linked to the DI group, Dawood Ibrahim, that is, and 6 people have been arrested. The Indian government places 10 non-governmental organizations, also called as NGOs, including those that relate to environment, child labor activism, Omidyar network under the FCRA watch list, and India to hold global Buddhist conference in November, and PM Modi will be giving awards on Buddhist studies. And merchandise exports grew 45.8% in August to 33.3 billion, while smart imports grew 51.7% to 47.1 billion. What are smart imports, Sridharji?
Smart imports are those which have requires, like the APIs, there are other kind of technologies which you probably require for EVs, and so on and so forth. So that's the smart imports. So and also crude belongs to that. So we receive a fair amount of Brent crude, which gets processed. So those come under what you call as the smart imports, which effectively is reprocessed and used for not only domestic consumption but sold to the other countries as export. So there's an export-import combination when you take a look at the Brent crude. Some of these movements in the import prices as a result of, I think we gave the numbers yesterday, from $50 to $70 movement in the Brent crude prices. So that is, I think we covered on the export side, but just wanted to reassure the August, again, the numbers, the export numbers, especially merchandise exports numbers, has gone up, which continues to say that notwithstanding the fact that there are still recoveries and India seems to be gaining momentum in opening and expansion of its domestic, the exports continue to augment to the extent it is feasible. It is acting as the substitution for anything that is lost domestically.
India will need 8 trillion of new gross capital formation to create a new greenfield assets to be a 5 trillion economy by 2027. According to a Deloitte survey, India continues to remain an attractive investment destination. Let's take a quick look at markets now. The Dow sheds 290 points and the S&P finishes lower despite better than expected inflation numbers. We have the diagram up of all the indices. Sridharji, please continue.
I think the key message is that the inflation number, the consumer price index, came better than expected. But the story is, when I say better than expected, the numbers were reasonably on target. Having said that, there is the sentiments of 290 points. The markets being down is reflected by three factors. One factor is there is now a new worry which is called as, when is the market going to have a correction? So there is that correction worry. Inflation continues to weigh heavily on the minds of the people, and as well as the rate rise, increase in interest rates. These three parameters continue to play a part, and the confusion that prevails around the Delta variant and mandates is it under control, or is it we have another looming crisis emerging out of that? So the market sentiments played into that. And it's nothing to do with earnings. I think we again couple of days ago we reported that data. Nothing to do with the earnings and other things as it relates to the present market conditions. The sentiments reflect something in the future, and you always have some implications in the pricing.
And markets will weather the storm in 2021 and finish higher, but the headwinds are here for 2022 with higher taxes, inflation, rising rates, what have you. Sridharji, your prognosis for how you've been saying this very, very consistently, that 2021 is going to be a banner year for stocks, but 2022 there could be a correction. With the budget also not being passed, debt ceiling has not been raised, and all these new controversies growing, I think there's going to be a fair amount of gridlock in Washington for the next few weeks, sir.
There's going to be a gridlock in the next few weeks. The Mark Milley story is not a great news. How that is, I don't think that anybody is going to take it very, take it easy. And I think that we are going to see that those issues blow out in the coming days. Blinken is not finished as yet. What more is going to come out into the discussions, we don't know. But there's a lot of information that is either being hidden or not being made transparent. And the objective of these sessions are that. And we also have the looming issue of the defense secretary not turning up for the hearings. So these are all unheard of, but we are in uncharted waters as it relates to both domestic as well as the Afghan policy.
Also, it's sometimes interesting to see what did not get answered. There was a specific pointed question directed at Blinken that whether Vladimir Putin threatened Joe Biden, and he chose to not answer that question. So there is a very interesting sub-story that happened. This will be covered in the days and weeks. Nothing will ever stay quiet in DC. We are going to know the truth, but If that should stink to high heaven, remember that we were one of the first ones to talk about this. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow, bright and early. Thanks for watching again. Namaskar. And Sridharji, hopefully your internet is better tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, my apologies. Have a wonderful day. It's a very important session today, and I'm unfortunate that that we couldn't get the live feed going. But thank you, and have a wonderful day.